didn't budget enough time to defrost my car. But we are on Lamed Daled Amud Aleph at the two dots, about 10 or so lines down from the top of the page. The new section, according to the Mishnah, it says that one of the differences between Dini Nefashos and Dini Mamonos is that in Dini Nefashos, in capital cases, what happened? In capital cases, then you're not allowed to change your mind. And we're going to talk about what exactly and how far that goes. You can't change your mind. But in monetary law, that if you voted that he's guilty, you can change your mind and say he's innocent. If you voted he's innocent, you can change your mind and say he's guilty. But in capital cases, someone who said innocent can't switch to the side of guilty. Someone who said guilty can switch to innocent. Someone who said innocent can't switch to the side of guilty. Question we're about to discuss is that universal, or is that not always true? Can you sometimes change your mind? It says Amara. So it says Din Nefashos Malamid in capital cases. One who's teaching on the side of, like I said, side of innocent cannot switch to guilty. One says guilty can switch to innocent. Amarav. Rav says Lo Shanu El B'Shas Masu Matim. That's only talking about when they're discussing what their opinion is of the case. Shas Gemar Din, when it's actual time to issue a verdict, when they're voting and coming to a final conclusion, whoever is on the side of merit is allowed to vote guilty. You literally can teach guilt, but meaning you're allowed to vote however you want. When it comes to voting, you can vote however you want. When you're arguing, you can't switch sides to argue that he's guilty. Once you start arguing on the side of innocent, even if you're convinced that he's guilty, you're not allowed to say reasoning why he's guilty. You just can't switch sides in argument, but in discussion. But in terms of the vote, you are allowed to vote however you feel. Misve, they challenge that. Lamachares, the next morning. This is a Mishnah later on. So it says the way they would go. The Mishnah describes they would discuss it. If they didn't find a reason to let him off the hook the first day, then they'd delay till the second day. So it says Lamachares, the second day of the trial. Now Mashkim, and they'd get up early, Uvain, and come to Beis Hamazaka Omer, the one who's the side of innocent, Omer, he says, Ani Hamazaka, I said yesterday he's innocent. Hamazaka Ni Makomi, I still say he's innocent. Mechayev Omer, the one who said guilty yesterday, guilty said, Omer, Ani Mechayev, I'm the one who said liable yesterday. Mechayev Makomi, they still say he's liable. Hamalamin Chova, Malamin Zchus. The one who said guilty before can say innocent. But the one who taught that he's guilty, is innocent, cannot go back and try to teach that he's guilty. And it says, but Lamachar is the second day, Mardinu, that's the verdict, and you can't change your mind. It says, according to your logic, Lamachar is the second day, Masu Matan Mileka. There's no discussion the next day. There's for sure discussion the next day. If there's no discussion the next day, there's no point waiting a day. You clearly get another chance to discuss it. Kikatani b'shas masur, what it's talking about when it says that you can't change your mind, that's during discussion, but for sure at the time of voting you could change your mind. That doesn't prove anything. Tashma, another brisa. So then it discusses that a Sanhedrin is 23. This is a Mishnah later on. Sanhedrin, we have views already, but the Sanhedrin is 23. If it's not a clear verdict, either because you don't have a majority of 2 for guilt, or because one of the judges says I don't know, then you add on 2 more judges. Keep adding on until you reach the maximum limit of 71. Once you reach the maximum limit of 71 and it's still not a clear verdict, then this is what you do. It says Danan elu keneged elu. These judge in front of these, meaning they keep arguing. Until one person who originally said guilty switches over to say innocent, and then you have a majority of 1 for innocent. Let's say a majority of 1 for guilty takes 2 to execute somebody. So you have, let's say you have, 36 to 35. So then you keep arguing until one of the 36 who said guilty switches to the side of innocent. You have 36 innocent, which is a simple majority for innocence, and he's off the hook. But it is true that you can vote however you want at the end. Listening Nami Ibcha could also teach the opposite. Meaning that one of the 35 who say innocent can switch to the side of guilty, and then you have 37, 34, which is a majority of at least 2. Why doesn't it say that? It must be that you can't change your mind. The answer is no. Tana azachus kamahada. It's trying, the Mishnah is trying to be optimistic. So saying, you keep arguing until one of the people who says guilty says innocent, and so we don't have to kill him. It's true that if someone on the innocent side says guilt switches to guilty, then we will kill him. But we just don't want to go there. We don't want to talk about it. It's not going after a case of liability. We're not looking to teach other options for guilt. Try to explore all the possibilities for innocent. Tashma, another brisa. Look, Dama Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, "Echa min amalam talmidim." So those were mishnayos. Until now, it was mishnayos. Now it's a brisa. If one of the students, Shazika, who had a logic to say he's innocent, umeis, and he died, Rono so ki'iluchai. You look at him as if he's still alive. Still in his place, meaning you don't subtract him from the total of innocent votes. So, why don't you just subtract him? Lema, like we could say, Ilu Ayakayim, if he'd been alive still, maybe he changed his mind. How can you be so certain that he's innocent? Maybe he would have switched to guilty by now. My answer is no. We don't have any evidence that he changed his mind. Therefore, the last thing we heard from him is that he's innocent. So we're going to we'll pretend he's alive and treat him on the side of innocent. It says, but we had a message from Misam, from Tom. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, that according to the words of Rabbi Chanina, Motz Michlal Rabbeinu, that argues on Rabbeinu, on Rav. So this statement originally was made by Rav, saying Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, we just read, goes against what Rav said. Why does it go against? Because it sounds like that you can't change your mind. My answer is no. We had a tradition that says that there's a contradiction here between Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, who says that if one of the students who says innocent dies, then he's still innocent. That the version of the tradition you had was that the message was that they're contradictory, that proves that you can't change your mind to be guilty. Said no, it says ein motzeh. You missed a word there. The tradition is ein motzeh. It's not a contradiction. There's no problem here. Tashma, let's see another brisa. Another this is actually mission later on. Shnei Sofer Dayan, the two court stenographers, literally the scribes of the court of the judges, stand in front of the litigants or stand in front of the court. One is on the right side of the court, one is on the left side of the court. When they write down the words of the people who say innocent, the words of the people who say guilty. It says, there's a reason to write down the words of the people who say liable. Because the next day, they see another reason. Then you have to wait another day to execute the person. So if the logic of the case changes, then you have to add an extra. You have to always mull it over for a night. So they come with a new reason for guilt, then you have to add it over. That's why I have to keep track of what the reason why he said guilty yesterday. So if he forgets, he might say the same thing. We think it's new, and we add an extra day or not, and vice versa. Since we knew, we might think it's the same thing, and then we might not add a day when we need to.
We're just talking about capital cases mostly?
Yeah, the rest of the Masechta is capital cases.
Some of the words. Okay, go on.
Yeah, the rest of the Masechta. I mean, there are other cases, non-capital cases that creep in several times, but primarily the rest of the Masechta is about capital cases. The people say innocent. My time. What's the reason to write down the words of people innocent? Lav mishum. Isn't it because they see another logic, the chova that he was guilty, that we don't listen to them? That's why I have to write down what they said. Because if they change their mind for guilty, we don't care. So you have to write down the innocent, so we know exactly what they said yesterday. So no, it's not true. So you don't have two rabbis saying the same halacha from two different sources. Because Rabbi Yossi asked Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Yossi asked Rabbi Yochanan, Amru Shnaim, if two people said Tam Echad, one logic, Mishnei Mikras, from two different sources, from two different verses, Mo, what do you do with them? Amr Le, he said to them, Ein mon lehem ela echad, you can only count them as one. Meaning they're contradictory. If two rabbis say two statements which are inherently contradictory, you can't count them both on the same side, because one of them is wrong. Well, how do we know that? What's the source for that? Amar Abaye says, Damakra, the verse says, Achis Dibra Elokim, Hashem spoke once, Shtaim Zu Shemati. I heard two. What is it? Ki Oz Le'Elokim. Because there's strength to God. What does that mean? Mikra Echad Yotze Lekamatam. One verse come into many things. Hashem said one, and we heard two. So one verse can have multiple understandings. That's possible. But you can't have the opposite. The two things come from one place. If it comes from one place, it comes from there. You don't need it to come from somewhere else. Dear Ishmael, those are the words of Ishmael. Tana, then another bride says, ukapatish yufotet sela, like a hammer smashes a rock. Just like this hammer gives off a lot of sparks. So too, one verse gives off a lot of understandings. So one verse can be interpreted multiply, but you can't have two sources for the two different sources for the same halacha. Where is an example that you have a debate where there's no debate between them practically, but they're saying the same source from two different places, the same halacha from two different places? Where does it ever happen? You just said if that would happen, you only count them as one. What's an example of that? Where do you ever see that there's two rabbis, each who bring their own source to the same halacha? There's no debate between them practically, just arguing what the source is.
The interpretation of the source. What the source
meaning what the source, they're arguing what the source is that gives us halacha. That there's no practical difference between these two rabbis, and just one says I derive this halacha from here, one says I derive the halacha from here, but there's no other difference. Because if there's a difference between them, then potentially they could both be true. They could both be sources for different things. But if they're identical, that can't be. So what's an example? So Omer Rav Zid says, the son like says in the Mishnah, Mizbeach Makadesh Eseroilo. The altar sanctifies anything that is appropriate for it. That means that if anything that's somewhat relevant to the altar is put on the altar, even if it's not directly relevant, as we'll see shortly, you don't take it down. It's sanctified enough that if it's there, you don't take it down. And Yeshua says, anything that's fit for the fire, if it goes up, it doesn't come down. Can I skip something? No. Shanam, the pasuk says, Ha'ola ala mokada, the sacrifice on the pyre. Ma'ola, what do we know about an ola? She royally ishim, that's fit to be burned up. Im also lo yiteisered. If it goes up, it shouldn't come down. Afkol, so to anything that shehu royally ishim that's fit to be burned, im also yered. If it goes up, it shouldn't come down. I mean, anything that's supposed to be burned, if there wouldn't be an additional problem with it, it should have been put on the mizbeach and burned up. That if it goes up, it doesn't come down. But other things, if they go up, they do come down. Right. So in basic parts of right. Meaning, let's say you have an ola that becomes tummy. Now let's put something that's tummy on the mizbeach. But if it became tummy, then you put it on the mizbeach, you wouldn't take it down. Since it's fit to be burned, even though there's some problem that says you're not supposed to burn it, but since it's fit to be put on the mizbeach, you leave it there. So one opinion says, the first opinion says, anything fit for. First opinion says the mizbeach sanctifies anything that's appropriate for the mizbeach. One says anything that's appropriate for the fire. It seems like this ostensibly they're the same thing. What's the difference between them? Anything appropriate for the mizbeach, anything appropriate for fire. Seems they're saying the same thing with two different sources. His first opinion is doesn't actually quote his pasuk, but it says Kol yiga bo yikdash, anything that touches it is sanctified. The second opinion says ala ola, the anything like the ola that's on the fire, it stays there. Of course, you really anything that goes up doesn't come down. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, Anything that's fit for the mizbeach, if it goes up, shouldn't come down. Now the pasuk says, "Ki ahola amo ketal mizbeach." This is the ola which is on the fire in the mizbeach. Ma ola, what is it ola? She roy lagari mizbeach. It's fit for the mizbeach. Im also lo seirade. If it goes up, it doesn't come down. Of course, she roy the mizbeach. Anything that's appropriate for the mizbeach, im ala lo yered. That's the second opinion. So the original one was just an introduction, I guess. Yeah. So I was reading wrong. So it says anything appropriate for the mizbeach doesn't come down. If Yeshua says not from a burnt offering, just like a burnt offering goes in his back, doesn't come down, so too anything on his back doesn't come down. And Rabbi Gamliel says it's an ola that goes on his back, anything appropriate in his back doesn't come down. So it sounds like they're saying the same idea from two different sources. And he said that can't be. But Tavayu, the two of them, my Kamarbi, what do we add in? What do we say that goes up, doesn't come down? The Sulam, things that are puzzle, things that are not, that don't belong in the Mizbeach. Mar Maisi mi Mimokida, one brings it from the first one, Mimokda, from the fire. Mar Maisi la mi Mizbeach, and one brings it from the word Mizbeach. Because anything on the Mizbeach stays. So it's not a good example of a Hasa, but over there, before Pligi, they're arguing. So I say it because it says in later on in that exact Mishnah, there's no debate between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, but except for the blood and the libations. Rabbi Gamliel says anything fit from his bath, they go on the mizbeach, they go on the corner of his bath, not in the fire, but on the corner of his bath. Since they go on the mizbeach, they don't come down. Shua, who said anything fit for the fire, Omer, he says they should come down because they're not fit for the fire, they don't get burned. So the one opinion says we learn out from his back, so anything on his back, if it goes up, doesn't come down. One says learn from fire, only things that are appropriate for fire, which excludes wine and oil. So that's not a good example of two opinions getting the same halakha from two different sources. Ela Amar of Papa. Papa says, Kidatani says in the Brisa. Very similar to the last one. Yosi Glila Omer. Yosi Glila says, Tokshanema, because the verse says, anything, that's the one I quoted earlier by accident. Anyone that touches the altar is sanctified. Shemeani, I could have heard from here. Bain Roy, Bain Jaina Roy. Whether it's appropriate in his back or not, anything that touches it would be sanctified and would stay there. Even let's say someone would put a non kosher animal or something that's not a carbon at all. It seems to say anything touching his back is sanctified. So I could have thought it's anything. So it says kivasim, sheep. So what's the connection to this and sheep? Ma kvasim, what do we know about sheep? Ruyin that are fit for the mizbeach at some point, in potentially at least. Av kol roy, only things that are appropriate for the mizbeach. If they go up, they stay up. Anything else comes down. Kiva Omer says ola. We learn from the word ola, a burnt offering. Ma'ola roy, just like an ola is appropriate for the mizbeach. Av kol roy, so too anything that's appropriate. If it goes up, doesn't come down. When it says v'tivai, the two of them, Maiti, what are they leaving out? Psuli, things that are not appropriate. Mar Maiti lamikvasim, one leans out from sheep, it's not similar to sheep. Mar Maiti lamiola, and one leans out from the ola, burnt offering. Amar Rav Ada bar Ava, ola sa'of psula ikibinana. No, there's a difference between them. A burnt offering of a bird. Mana Maiti lamikvasim, the one that leans out from sheep. Kvasim, any kind of sheep that goes up won't come down. Kvasim, sheep, yes. Aval ola sa'of lo, but an burnt offering of a bird, no. If it goes up, it would come down. Mine needs ola, but not for the word ola. Fila ola sa'of nami, even the ola of a bird doesn't come down. So they're arguing they're not the same thing. It's not two different sources of the same halachas because halachas are not the same. Ella Amar Vashi says, okay, third try, let's find a case of there's two opinions, two sources of the same thing that have to be contradictory. The sign it says in the Brisa, Dam Yechashev Ishahu Dam Shavak. It's talking about someone who slaughters an animal to Hashem even outside the base of Mikdash. Said blood it'll be considered for this person, he spilled blood. What does that teach us? L'Rav Zorik that teaches even if someone sprinkles blood outside the Mizbeach, outside the base of Mikdash, even to Hashem, he's still liable to a death sentence. The verse only talks about shechting and slaughtering an animal. If someone slaughters an animal outside the base of Mikdash, even to Hashem, he's liable to a death sentence, a spiritual death sentence, not earthly, but he's liable to a heavenly death sentence. So what about Yeah. But what about if he sprinkles blood? It says from that we said it should be considered blood to him. That teaches us if he sprinkles blood, then even that's enough to be liable to that's even though it doesn't explicitly say at the first verse. These are the words of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Kiva says, "O zevach." If someone brings in ola or a zevach or a feast offering, why does it say it's the same thing? The Rambam says, that teaches us to add in the sprinkling of the blood to say that he's liable to descendants. Tavayu, the two of them, Maika Marbu. What are they coming to add in? Zrika, sprinkling of blood. It should be. One says we learn it from. It should be considered blood to him. Or a peace offering. So you see that the different sources say malacha. V'amar Rabbi Abahu says no. If someone does both actions, that's the difference between them. Because if he does it by purpose, he gets a heavenly death sentence. If he does it by accident, it brings a carbon. What if he did both? He slaughtered and he himself sprinkled the blood. So they're arguing these two opinions, that one says you get it from it should be considered blood, and one says it should be considered or a peace offering. So they're arguing about what if he does both. He slaughters the animal outside the base of English and he sprinkles the blood. Right? Did Rabbi Yishmael, who said the source is should be considered blood. It's the same negative commandment. Therefore, he's only liable once. The Rabbi Akiva is bringing from a totally different pasuk. Someone brings an ola, or I guess the same process. Someone brings an ola or a zevach or a peace offering. That's a different source. Chayav Shtayim, then instead of two different averas, two different commandments, and therefore he's liable twice to two sets of karbanos, or potentially two sets of lashes if he does it on purpose. No, ha'ir marla, but it was said about it. Amar Bava says, "Ava de Rabbi Kiva, even according to Rabbi Kiva, nami also enochai velach is still only liable once." The Makar the pasuk says, "Shanta lo zecha." There you should bring your karbanos. V'shamta said, it says there you should do it. Arvinu rachmana lekulu asiyas. All the doings account as one. It's only one thing. So everybody agrees that if someone does both, they're only liable one. Therefore, there's no machlokas between them in halakha. But they still bring different sources. The next example of the same source coming from two places, which is impossible, and they're clearly arguing, and therefore we discount one of them. Moving on. It says, Dinim is done in Bayom. You can judge them during the day, and if you run out of time, you finish them at night. But when it comes to capital cases, you don't finish at night. You just go on to the next day. It says Simon Mishpat Mana Mata. So we're getting some cases later on that have these words will appear in them, or at least variation of these words will appear in them. Mishpat is judgment, Mana is answering, and Mata is staff or leaning, inclining. We'll see. Is Minani meaning? How do we know that you can judge monetary law during the day and not at night? And but capital cases you can only judge at day and not at night. So Bar Papa Bar Papa says the verse says. You can judge the assembly at any time. You see, you can even go into night. If you can judge at any time, even into the night, unless it didn't nami, then why can't you start a case at night? It says you can finish a case. Why can't you start it? It says no, Kida Rava, like Rava said. The Rava Ramiksi, Rava saw contradiction verses. One verse says Shaftu Esa'am B'choles. You can judge people at any time. See, if it says on the day that he gives over to his son and passes the inheritance to his son. It says in the day. Why day? Because you can only do it in the day. Haketa, how do you reconcile these two? Yom din, the judgment has to start in the day. That's why the day is for. Laila Gemar din, but night is for finishing off the case. You can even finish at night. It says Masnisan, our mission that says that you can keep going at night on monetary cases. Look, Meir is not according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The Tani, because it says in the Brayz, Rabbi Meir, Omer Meir said. What does it say? It says, based on the rabbis, on their mouths, there'll be any argument and any affliction. What's the connection between the arguments and the afflictions? It's ras. Ella, rather, makesh din the nagan. It says they're creating a parallel between monetary arguments and ras, and the white affliction. Ma nagayim biyom, just like it says clearly about nagayim, it's only in the day. It says according to the day, the daylight of the Kohen. The Kohen comes to look at him in the daytime specifically. So just like when we know by tzuras, it's only in the day that they can be judged. I should stop taking my hand off the spot. The Batra says if a yom heros bo on the day that he sees in it a sign of contamination, then he's tameh. Af rivim miyom. So too the arguments are only in the day. Man negayim. What do we know about negayim, about these tzuras, the affliction? Shelo b'sumin. That you can't judge it if you're blind, because you see the pasuk says l'chol mareini kohen, to the full vision of the eyes of the kohen. Af rivim. So too arguments. Shelo b'sumin. It comes to exclude people who are blind. They're not allowed to be judges. And we compare also the other direction. We compare plagues to justice, to arguments. Mavri, what do we know about the arguments? Shelo b'krovim cannot have relatives involved. Af negayim shelo b'krovim. So too the gayim can't have a relative involved. If your relative is a Kohen, he's not allowed to look at your tzuras. So, yeah. So that's what we learn out from both directions. We see we learn from one to the other. It says, Imam Rivim Bishlosha. You might have said, just like we know that monetary laws only takes 3 judges. Maybe when you're judging the tzuras, you need 3 judges for that. Dinu, and the logical to say that. Mona Bishlosha is money. It takes 3 judges to judge. But in monetary law, you're not talking about the person, you're talking about the money. Kuvala Kosherin, his whole body. When you're talking about him having tzuras, certainly you should need 3 judges. Tamalova, the pasuk says, bring him to Aaron the Kohen, or to one of his descendants of the Kohen. See that 1 judge is enough. Halamad teaches us Kohen echad roa as an even a singular Kohen is allowed to view the tzuras. Now I have a story. Well, I guess we should stop here. Okay, let's do the story quickly and then we'll stop. Ahu Samia, this blind person. No, we have 10 more minutes. What am I talking about? Yeah, 10 more minutes. I'm thinking it's Monday because there's no school yesterday. Okay, 10 minutes. Okay. Ahu Samia, there's this blind person. Tahava Veshivu say to Rabbi Yochanan, was in the neighborhood of Rabbi Yochanan. Tahava Dain Dina, he was judging cases. V'lo Amar Lei Rabbi Yochanan v'lo Mini. Rabbi Yochanan did not protest at all. It says, Hechi Avan Hachi, how can you do that? V'Amar Yochanan. Yochanan says, Halacha Stam Mishnah, Halacha is like a basic Mishnah. Without any opinion, if it says in just a Mishnah without any opinion attached to it, that's the halacha. Tana, it says in the Mishnah, Kola kash ladun kash lahayid. Anyone who's allowed to judge is allowed to testify. Veisha kash lahayid, and there are those that are allowed to testify, ve'in kash ladun, and not allowed to judge. Rabbi Yochanan says, "L'zvui sum ba'achas me'inav." That comes to add on someone who's blind in one eye that he can be a witness because he can see because he has one eye. Cannot be a judge because you need to have full eyesight to judge. We learned out from, like I said, we learned out from the Gaim, but you have to full eyesight to judge. So you see, certainly a blind person can't judge. So how can you let this blind person judge in the neighborhood? Rabbi Yochanan stamacharina ashkach. Now Rabbi Yochanan found an arguing plain Mishnah. So that which Rabbi Yochanan says, that if there's a Mishnah taught without any name associated with it, that's halacha. That's only if there's no contradiction to it. There's 2 contradictory Mishnahs with a name that doesn't, then he doesn't necessarily pass like a particular one of them. So there's another Stam Mishnah, there's another Mishnah without a name on it that argues instead of blind person is allowed to judge. What's the other one? It says, Dini Mamonas, Danim B'Yom V'Gam B'Layla. Our Mishnah that says in monetary law you can judge in the day and finish at night. What does it mean? If you say so I skip. So what does it mean at night? Well, at night everybody's blind. So if you need to be able to see the judge, you can't judge at night. So it must be that even a blind person can judge. Because if anyone can judge at night, then a blind person can judge even during the day. So it says, "My ulmei had a high star, mi high star." So now Rabbi Yochanan says the rule is halacha follows the main opinion. Why did he pick this one? Who says this is more accurate than that one? So ibois ema, if you want, you could say stama derabim adif, that a stam of the multitudes. That if it says plain, but it is the the multitudes. Because we know in general that the opinion says you cannot judge a night is a singular opinion, but the opinion says you can judge a night is everyone else who argues on him. We have a different Raisa that says that. So we have two Mishnahs that have no name associated with them. One says you can judge a night, one says you can't, or one says a blind person can't judge, which is the same as night. So one says a blind person cannot judge, one says you can judge at night. Those are contradictory. So we're going to pick the one that follows majority, because there's a singular, one rabbi says a blind person can't judge, and therefore you cannot get judge at night. One Mishnah says that you can judge at night, and that's based on the majority opinion. So since we have a contradiction in the Mishnahs that talk without the name attached to them, we'll go with the Mishnah that quotes the majority opinion, not the Mishnah that quotes the minority opinion. That's the first answer. The Ibo is saying we want to say Mishnah Makatani La Gali Hilchas Dadaini. It was taught right here in this chapter. It's going through step by step all the laws of being a judge. Anything put here we know is halacha. We wouldn't put something random here that you have to deduce from elsewhere. That's not halacha. The fact that it's here tells us that's halacha. This is the main place it should be. Very mayor. Now we're going back and forth. We have, each one quote a verse. What do you do with the other one's verse? Hi. What do you do with the verse that says they should judge the people at all times? The rabbi said all times means even at night. Rameh says, no, you have to judge Renee. What does he do with this verse that says you can judge the people at all times? Amar Rava says, it comes to add on a cloudy day. It says in the Mishnah, in Negaim, you cannot look at the terrace in the early morning or in the late afternoon. You can't do it inside. Not on a cloudy day. Why? Because everything looks brighter. Anything weakly bright looks brighter when it's cloudy. If a lot of sun, then the white of the skin pales by comparison. No pun intended. But when it's right, but when it's bright, the opposite, right? When it's dark, then it looks much brighter. So you're gonna find tameh when he doesn't deserve to be tameh. So you have to do it when there's full light. Therefore, you can see it for what it really is. For you can't do it right at noon at the brightness of the day. Something bright looks dim. So you have to do it, on the edges in the mid morning and mid afternoon. Can't do it early morning. Can't do it right at noon. You have to do it in the mid morning and the mid afternoon. Rabbi Yehuda says, you
compare monetary cases with SARS, one requiring light and the other.
What it's saying is that since we're learning out the law, because the rabbis learn out, it says on their mouths will be all the judgments and all the tziras. So you see they're the same. Just like tziras, you can only judge during the day. So in court case, you can only judge during the day. So you would have thought that means you can't even judge when it's cloudy. The verse says you can judge everyone at any time, even when it's cloudy. Now we have another verse. Here, because the rabbi said two verses. You judge the rabbis, there's people at every time. And it also says, on the day that you pass over inheritance, you can judge. During the day you can judge, but not at night. The day you pass over inheritance. Now asking the other verse. Mayor, hi b'yom my avidle. What does he do with this verse? It says, when the day that you give over to your sons, what does he do with that? He doesn't need that. He learns out from Tzaras. So we do with this verse. We needed that for it says in the Brisa. Rabbi Bar Chanina taught the Brisa in front of Nachman. Vayana will be the day he passes over his inheritance to his sons. You can only give out inheritances during the day, not at night. Amalei said back to him. That's Rav Nachman said back to Rabbi Bar Chanina. Amalei said, Abai said, where the bracha is in the words of Abai. Abai said back to him, Based on what you're saying, that if someone dies in the daytime, then his sons inherit him. But someone who dies at night, his sons don't inherit him. That can't be. If it says you can't give inheritance at night, well, if someone dies, that's giving inheritance. So that would mean if someone dies at night, his kids won't get his money. That can't be. Dilma, what it means is din nachlos come on. Maybe you mean the judgment of the court of the inheritances. Tanya says in the Brisa, "V'haisa l'vnei Yisrael l'chukas mishra." Should be for Jewish people for a permanent judgment. What does it say? Orukul barshukul yos din. It says the whole discussion about inheritance. That's called judgment. Can Rav Yehuda, like Rav Yehuda says, Amarav in the name of Rav. To Amar Yehuda Amarav, Rav Yehuda says the name of Rav. Shlosha, if you have three people, who come to visit a sick person who's on his deathbed, and he hands over to them his last wishes with his money. Ratu Kosvin, if they want, they can just write down in the testimony that here's what we saw, and then another court can certify it. Ratu Osadin, if they want, they can be judges and certify it on the spot. Shnayim, if there's only two witnesses, only two people came to visit him. Kosvin, they can write down what they saw, but ain't Osadin, but they cannot actually certify it as a court. It says, Lo shana ela b'yom, that's only in the day. If there are three people visiting a day, then they can certify as a court. But at night, Kosvin, even three people, they can write it down, they cannot certify it. Because they're witnesses, a witness cannot turn into a judge. What does this mean? It's a little tricky. Let me just finish off the line, and I'll come back and explain what this means exactly. It says, yeah, that's what I meant. I meant that you can't, if three people come to visit a sick person at night, then they can't judge, they cannot act as judge, they can act as witnesses. So there's a rule, what you're saying the rule is a witness cannot be a judge. When you're a judge, you have to be impartial. At least that's one explanation here, not necessarily the only one. Judge has to be impartial. If the judge himself is a witness, he can't be impartial. But that's only when he knows about it from testimony. But if he knows from his own knowledge, he just happens to know the answer, that's not a problem. So if he comes and visits the person during the day, whole basin comes and visits the person during the day, at that moment he can put on his judge hat and be a judge and judge based on his knowledge. But if he sees it at night, since he can't judge it at night, then in the morning, he's going to have to, the act of seeing cannot be an act of judgment. Therefore, we view his seeing as a witness. In the morning, he's going to actually have to come and testify in front of court. If he's testifying in front of the court, we can't make him a judge. So when he doesn't need to testify, when he just saw it and can judge based on what he saw, that's fine. And when he saw it in the day, that's fine. You can judge based on it. But at night, when you're required to come testify, that's not good enough. That once you testify, you cannot be a judge on it. Okay, I guess we try to go one more. It's already 55. I guess we'll stop here. Didn't quite do it off, but it was pretty long. So,
It was a long one.
Yep. Tomorrow's one is a little shorter. Quite a bit shorter. Okay.
That's what we need to catch up.
Yep. Thank you for the privilege of being here. Hopefully, Rabbi Gleizer will be feeling better. Tomorrow we'll be back.
Thank you for hopping in this.